This is Ngofeen with a short pre-episode announcement. We produced this episode earlier this year in May, and we thought it was a good time to run it again because it's about the way the U.S. is treating immigrants. It's about an immigrant to the United States who was very badly treated by the U.S. government. A lot has changed since May, and at the end of the episode, we're going to give you an update. So please stay tuned for that.
Tío, bendición, ¿cómo está todo? Feliz cumpleaños. Que la pase fino, excelente. Que disfrute bastante. Que Dios lo bendiga siempre.
This is Roger Eduardo Molina Acevedo, 29 years old, Venezuelan, millennial, from the state of Aragua.
Tío, bendición, ¿cómo está todo? Feliz cumpleaños.
And this is a message of him calling to wish his uncle Noel a happy birthday. Roger is not married, but has a common law relationship with his partner, Daniela Nunez. No kids. They just landed at the airport in Houston, Texas, together. Their first time on U.S. soil. She's standing beside him. They make their way from the plane towards border control and customs. Roger graduated from high school back in Venezuela. He worked at his family hardware stores. He loves soccer. He has a tattoo of a soccer ball, a pine forest, a Real Madrid crown, and an infinity sign with the word family. He and Daniela have been cleared to enter the United States conditionally, approved for refugee status. The U.S. State Department runs a program called the Safe Mobility Initiative that vetted them for months. Roger's uncle Noel told him, if you're gonna go to the United States, do it the legal way.
Regular, no. Usted busca la manera, pero lo dice de manera ready.
January 9th, 2025, they're at the Houston airport. They've just made it through the visitors line, the line for non-citizens, to border control. It's the final days of the Biden administration, and even though Roger and Daniela have been approved as refugees, the Border Patrol has the final say as to whether or not they can enter.
¿Cuándo fue la primera vez que supiste que algo podría estar mal con tu sobrino, que le podría haber pasado algo?
That's Juan Pappier translating. He's Deputy Director for the Americas at Human Rights Watch. My question to Uncle Noel, when was the first moment you realized that something was wrong with your nephew?
He called me saying that things weren't well. It was immediate.
The agent at the border starts asking Roger about his tattoos.
The migration control, they stopped him and they about one of the tattoos he has, and they asked him questions about the tattoo. What does this tattoo mean? They said that the tattoo was associated with some of the criminal groups that operate in Venezuela.
There's no evidence that tattoos of a pine forest, a soccer ball, Real Madrid, or an infinity sign with the word family on it are associated with Venezuelan gangs. But Donald Trump is about to assume office, and he's blasting Venezuelans, suggesting Tren de Aragua gang members have overrun American cities, and he's going to deport them all. In the months ahead, we'll hear stories from people who've been deported about Border Patrol officers that seem emboldened and simply ignore their attempts to seek asylum. On today's episode, enforced disappearances at the U.S. border, the deportation of the Venezuelans. This is Rights and Wrongs, a podcast from Human Rights Watch. I'm Ngofeen Mputubwele. I'm a writer, a lawyer, and a radio producer. Human Rights Watch asked me to look at human rights hotspots throughout the world through the eyes and ears of people on the front lines of history. This week, the loaded gun. Says Uncle Noel. Roger is my nephew. He relied on me as a support even more than his own dad. This whole situation he's endured, he's called every day telling me how he feels, and I feel ill knowing what he's undergoing. And what's worse, there's nothing I can do. One of the big conversations being had in the courts right now surrounds a law called the Alien Enemies Act.
The Supreme Court ruled late yesterday that the Trump administration can continue to use a rare 18th century war authority to deport Venezuelan immigrants alleged to be gang members.
So this law, it's called the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. It's one that allows the president to take really broad actions against people who aren't citizens of this country. It enables the president to direct people who work for him, to detain people, to deport them, to also restrict how they live their lives.
This is Akshaya Kumar, Director of Crisis Advocacy at Human Rights Watch.
The law has only been used 4 times now. This 4th time is this year.
4?
By President Trump. Yeah, 4.
Oh, okay.
You can count them on your hand. The other 3 times were in wars, like wars that we study in history books. We know about them. World War II, World War I, the War of 1812. The reason that our current president has deployed this act is he says this country is being invaded by a Venezuelan gang.
Back to Roger.
He got very nervous. He thought that they would do something to him. The officers threatened to call the FBI and to get him arrested. He called me. He was very scared, thinking that something bad could happen to him.
The next day, Roger is still at the Houston airport, still detained. Daniela has been deported. Roger is alone. Uncle Noel happens to have a few Venezuelan friends in Texas. They put him in touch with an immigration attorney. Uncle Noel calls the immigration attorney who says, look, your nephew has 2 options. Either Roger goes to court to request asylum, or Roger will be deported. From the airport, Roger is taken into detention, moved around from detention center to detention center, and eventually he's transferred to a facility called the Montgomery Processing Center, also in Texas. After consulting with the lawyer says, look, given the look of things in the U.S., your nephew is better off requesting to self-deport to Venezuela. Uncle Noel relays this info to his nephew. Nephew Roger basically says, I want to get the hell home. I don't want to be here 1 minute longer. Reminder, his partner Daniela is gone. Things might be bad in Venezuela, but it's worse being detained here in the U.S.
And then what happened next?
Roger is transferred to Joe Corley Detention Center. And that's when things get bad. When he arrived at the center, Uncle Noel tells me, he called me crying and very, very nervous. He told me that they changed his detention outfit to one that was for criminals. In other words, someone who committed a serious crime. A red jumpsuit. He called me asking, why are they doing this? What do I do? So I asked, are they doing this just to you or to everyone? And he said, to everyone who's Venezuelan, they're making us wear this color.
So I was trying to calm him down, and I told him, if that's happening to all Venezuelans, don't worry. When you are sent back to Venezuela, you will be okay because you have never committed a crime and nothing wrong is going to happen to you.
But Uncle Noel tells me I feel that all of this was organized in order to move the Venezuelans under the Alien Enemies Act. A month passes. And then finally, he gets some news. March 13th, phone call, Roger.
He called me. He was very happy because finally he was told he was going to be deported.
He's going to be deported.
He told me that the nightmare was over. And this is something I like to emphasize because they were lied to. They were all told that they were going to be sent back to Venezuela.
ICE has this online detainee locator system where you can check on the status of someone who's been detained. It's inconsistent and it's not always up to date. Whenever it all had shifted from detention center to detention center, normally it should be updated in the ICE locator. And for a while, Uncle Noel can find Roger there. Then, Roger suddenly disappears from the immigration registry. Monday morning, Noel tells me, as soon as they open, I call the detention center. Roger isn't here. Where is he? We can't give you any other information. Call this other detention center. Which one? And they give me the number. I call this number. They tell me the same thing. Call another detention center. And they give me another number. I spent literally the whole morning calling immigration detention centers in Texas. I called at least 10, and no one gave me any information. At the end of that afternoon, around 5 p.m., I got the number for the central office of ICE in Houston. And I called the number, literally crying, that I wanted information about my nephew. And a woman on the phone, when she noticed I was crying, she said, "The only thing I can tell you is that your nephew was removed from the United States." Then crickets. Later that week,
the pictures are striking. More than 200 Venezuelan deportees flown on U.S. government planes out of Harlingen, Texas last week.
In the news, images of planes at an airport in El Salvador, a maximum security prison called CECOT.
Notorious prisons, a CECOT in El Salvador.
It wasn't until Wednesday when CBS News published the leaked list of people who were sent to El Salvador that we were able to confirm that he was sent there.
But today, CBS News has obtained a list of people deported. Hundreds of alleged gang members sent this past week to El Salvador.
El Salvador, not Venezuela.
And there were a bunch of people on those planes, like 240 people. 137 of those men, the government says, they removed under the Alien Enemies Act.
Yeah.
Crazy thing.
Yeah.
We are a month and a half out since that happened. They still have not said the names of the 137 people.
Yeah.
Imagine if that was your family member. They haven't even acknowledged the actual names. So the only thing we've got the government to say is 137 of those people were removed under the Alien Enemies Act. The other 100-some were removed under other legal authorities.
Here's the thing. We don't actually know under what authority the U.S. removed Roger, because there's no transparency, no due process. All we know is that the U.S. sent a bunch of Venezuelans to El Salvador, many of them under the Alien Enemies Act. And Roger was swept up among them.
What have you spoken to him since he's been there?
¿Has podido hablar con él desde que lo enviaron a El Salvador? We haven't been able to communicate a single word to him.
Noel says they are victims of a crime called enforced disappearance, done by a country that I respect deeply, in other words, the United States, but they've become part of a wave of disappearances of migrants. If you watch the videos of the Venezuelans landed in El Salvador, it is disturbing. People's heads held down, shorn like sheep by loads of armed officers. Reminder, Roger, 29, millennial, has no criminal record, none. And there's something else he doesn't have now. Due process. This is the situation that we've been hearing about in the news with, like, turn the plane back. Like, no, don't ship them off, bring the plane back. And then the federal government being like, no, we're not bringing them back. That's this. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what this is.
Yeah.
This isn't even their home country. They were just sent to a third country to be kept in a jail. And we don't know the details of that agreement. Not only has the government not made public the names of the people who they put in this jail, they haven't told the Congress, they haven't told the public, like, what are the terms? And they don't know how long they're going to be in jail or when they'll get out or even what charges they're being held under. Mm-hmm. Like, that's the situation that these people are facing, and it's at the hands of the U.S. government.
Now that we're here, my lawyer brain wants to understand how we got here legally. Because, like it or not, the U.S. government is claiming that it is acting legally. So how is it making that argument? That's after the break.
My name is Belkis Villa, and I'm an associate director in the Crisis, Conflict, and Arms Division at Human Rights Watch. Recently, a colleague and I traveled to the remote Nuba Mountains in Sudan. Hundreds of thousands of people have fled there to escape fighting between the Sudanese army and the Rapid Support Forces. It was only by visiting camps there, where no other international organization is present, that we were able to collect the stories of people who were subjected to and who witnessed horrific attacks, killings, rape, and torture by the warring parties. My colleague and I are now urgently writing up our findings and will use our reports to press countries with influence in and over Sudan to protect civilians and send desperately needed aid. We can't do work like this without your support. Please go to our website, hrw.org/podcast/donate. Thank you.
So this is the text of the Alien Enemies Act. Whenever there is a declared war between the United States and any foreign nation or government, or any invasion or predatory incursion is attempted or threatened against the territory of the United States by any foreign nation or government, and the president makes public proclamation of the event, all natives, citizens, denizens, or subjects of the hostile nation or government, being of the age 14 years and upward, who shall be within the United States and not actually naturalized, shall be liable to be apprehended, restrained, secured, and removed as alien enemies. Can you tell me about the history of the law a bit?
Yeah, so the act came about back in the 1790s. The newly formed American government, the second president, John Adams, was worried about French citizens who were on U.S. territory and French influence over this young American government. And so he helped pass a set of 4 laws that are called the Alien and Sedition Acts, and the Alien Enemies Act was one of those. These laws were basically so broad and problematic that they were almost immediately criticized, and they were in large part the reason why John Adams was a one-term president, because Thomas Jefferson, who ended up being this country's 3rd president, launched a huge campaign against them, said it's something that gives far too much power to the executive branch because it limited what could be published through the Sedition Acts, and then it put all of these restrictions on people who weren't nationals of this country. Mm-hmm. Because of that blowback, Adams was kind of pushed out of power, and Jefferson took over, and he campaigned on how problematic these acts were. 3 of the acts were basically repealed or replaced almost immediately as soon as Jefferson got into power.
Okay.
This one was never used then. That's why I call it the loaded gun. It was the 4th act, and they never had cause to use it because there actually didn't end up being a war with France. He didn't end up using this act. But the act stayed on the books, and then it was picked up again 3 times, one during the War of 1812, when the U.S. was fighting the British, and then 2 times in World War I and World War II.
Here's a story about when this authority was used in World War I, when the U.S. was, reminder, fighting Germany.
Among the people who were detained, and these people detained for over a year, almost 2 years, was a German-born conductor of the Boston Symphony Orchestra and pretty much the whole symphony. And they put them all in this detention camp in Georgia. And some of the reasons why they rounded them up were they talk in German at the rehearsals. They didn't play the Star-Spangled Banner when someone requested it once. And the guy, the German conductor, Karl Muck was his name, he actually had Swiss citizenship, but they still rounded him up because of his place of birth. There was this whole group, they were kept in a camp in Georgia, and they protested what was being done to them because they, it was hot, it was sticky, and they weren't able to get out. And they decided to play Mozart, which is a German famous classical music composer.
Technically, maybe a nerd here, Austrian, but, German in the broad sense.
They decided to play Mozart in the nude in the prison camp. And this has been documented as their protest act. And they still were kept there. It got some public attention, but it took many, many months for them to get out. And he was just, this is just one example.
And Akshaya says this law has always been used in instances of war. But while one may not agree with it, one has to assume the government will argue something different. Like, the text grants the president powers in the case of declared war or invasions and predatory incursions. So, I asked Akshaya the painful question. Isn't the government's argument here that we're being invaded? In other words, we said at the start of the term, said that we're being invaded, and we've specifically said as to the we perceive the Venezuelan gang as an invasion, so that's the war declaration, or that's the, and if not war declaration, that is what meets the sort of threshold. Like, the war isn't required in the law textually, and so we're doing something that there is a war. That's why we said there's an invasion. Like, what's sort of your response to that?
Yeah, so I have 2 ways to think about this.
Yeah.
One is that's actually the whole reason why we wrote this report.
Human Rights Watch has published a report on the situation unfolding under the Alien Enemies Act.
Because the law in and of itself is a problem. And Congress should have, even before President Trump came into office, have gotten rid of it, struck it off the books, repealed it, and then we wouldn't be in this situation of reading between the lines or allowing it to be instrumentalized for patently absurd claims, right? So a simple solution is get rid of this law.
Yeah.
The other part of it is it's true that the law says that the president can invoke it in contexts where the country is facing an invasion or a predatory incursion. But those claims have to be borne out by facts. And it's really not about you and me deciding, but I would hope that judges are given the opportunity to scrutinize that.
Since I recorded that interview with Akshaya, at least 3 federal judges have done just that. In New York, Texas, and Colorado, judges issued orders looking at the invasion claim and dismissing it as laughable.
And I think something that's really concerning about the way the Trump administration has been using this law these past couple of weeks is they're saying not only can we unilaterally make this declaration, we can then say that individuals are part of this gang based on extremely flimsy indicia. Things like, oh, they have tattoos, or they're wearing Jordan sneakers, or they maybe talked to someone who was a gang member, we think. Like very flimsy assertions. And we shouldn't be questioned about these things. And judges shouldn't even question us about if there's an invasion or not. It's our decision. And that's where I think the whole idea of separation of powers comes into play. And I feel like that's what we should talk more about. This country, the way democracy has been so resilient in this country over many decades and generations is because the executive branch is, when it's tempted to overreach, checked by either Congress or the judiciary. That's the Supreme Court. The scary thing that we're seeing right now, and it's playing out with this case, with the Alien Enemies Act, is when judges are attempting to check that executive power, the executive branch is kind of saying, we're going to do it anyway. I think one of the most ridiculous things that I've seen when researching this is, as a part of this whole debate, the president of El Salvador, who's big on social media,
This is President Nayib Bukele.
wrote oopsie when commenting about the judge's orders. So it's like they openly know what they were supposed to do.
Yeah.
And they're rubbing it in the faces of the judges that they're not listening.
You know, at the end of the year, beginning of the year, everyone lots of people do New Year's resolutions, right? Where you're like thinking of the year ahead. If you could go back and talk to yourself on January 1st and sort of prepare yourself for the year to come, what would you tell yourself?
I wish I could go back to January 1st, and I would do everything in my power to stop him from going to the United States or to give him advice. I used to admire the United States, but I can't say the same right now. I've been going to the United States for the last 15 years, and this year for the first time I felt fear. I felt fear of being labeled, of being imprisoned, of being accused. It's been a very difficult year so far. I ask God every day for this nightmare to end.
This is the point of these policies, to frighten people.
I don't sleep well, and every time I wake up in the middle of the night, I tell God that if He's waking me up so that my nephew can sleep, I am fine with that, because I'm sure he's having a very difficult situation that is incredibly unfair.
Last question, what would you tell your nephew if you could?
Y la última pregunta es, ¿qué le dirías a tu sobrino si pudieras hablar con él?
Un abrazo enorme, un abrazo enorme. Yo viajo para Venezuela mañana.
I will give him a big hug. In fact, I am traveling to Venezuela tomorrow, and I pray to God that he be sent to Venezuela and that we can meet and see each other again and hug each other again.
Fíjate algo, como una semana antes de que lo deportaran, él me dijo que se quería suicidar porque ella no quería vivir esa situación. Si eso me lo dijo estando en Estados Unidos, donde hablábamos todos los días, no me quiero imaginar qué está pasando en esa hora.
When he was in the United States, he called me one day saying that he wanted to commit suicide. And if that's how he felt being in the United States, I cannot imagine how he's feeling in El Salvador.
I'm very sorry.
Sentimos mucho, Noel.
So that was the episode we produced last May. And as I said, there have been a lot of changes. Here's just one. On July 18th, as part of a prisoner exchange, 252 Venezuelans the U.S. sent to CECOT in El Salvador were released. Roger was one of them. He's back in Venezuela, and he joins me now on Zoom, along with Human Rights Watch's Juan Pappier, who's going to translate and also answer a few questions I have for him. Roger, first question is just a hard one, I guess, but how are you?
Bueno, ahorita a pesar de lo que sucedió, yo siento que estoy bien.
Now you're back in Venezuela. Have you been able to start your life back together? And in particular, we were curious if you've been able to see Daniela, your partner.
Bueno, sí,
His partner came from Colombia. She was in Colombia. She came back to Venezuela in September, and they were able to meet, to hug, to kiss each other. It was very emotional, and here they are trying to restart their lives and trying to start again.
a enfrentar la vida.
When you talk to people, what do you say about what it was like inside of CECOT?
Sí, claro, bueno, eso fue de verdad desde el primer momento.
From the moment we arrived, I said, my God, what is going to happen to us? Then I realized we were in CECOT because I had seen the prison in some videos. They beat us since the moment we arrived. If you spoke out loud, they hit you. If you didn't go to bed, they hit you. For moments, I thought we were in hell because when they were not hitting me, they were beating my cellmates. And the worst part was not knowing anything. We didn't know what was going to happen with us. We didn't know anything about their situation.
Estábamos ahí, cuando íbamos a salir, o sea, no sabíamos absolutamente nada.
Juan, you and others at Human Rights Watch have been investigating what happened in CECOT, and you'll issue a report soon. Can you tell me some of what you've learned so far?
So far, we have interviewed 40 people who, like Roger, were detained in CECOT, and more than 100 of their family members. We are documenting the torture that these people endured. They were beaten during daily searches. They were beaten when they allegedly disobeyed prison rules. They were beaten as they were transferred to CECOT. They were beaten when the U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, visited. They were constantly and repeatedly beaten and tortured in prison. These cases of torture occurred both in the hallways of the prison and also in what guards call the island, an isolation cell, very small, only a couple of meters, that was dark, that had very limited natural light and natural air, where people were held in complete isolation as punishment for supposedly disobeying prison rules, such as speaking with other detainees or showering at their own time.
Thank you, Juan. And actually, I just have one last question for Roger. What do you want people outside of Venezuela, people like me in the States or in other parts of the world, what do you want them to know about your experience?
Bueno, fíjate que siempre había esperado este momento porque nadie me había preguntado eso y yo sí quisiera darle un
I've been
mensaje.
waiting for people to ask me this question because I really want to send a message to the world.
Que es mentira, simplemente
Some people say that we are lying, that it's not true that we were beaten. Some say that this is a show that the Venezuelan government is trying to put out to accuse the U.S. government. That's not true. But if you don't believe me, if you don't believe my 252 cellmates, then ask President Nayib Bukele of El Salvador, ask President Donald Trump, ask the director of the CECOT prison to release the videos because they were recording us all the time. And in those recordings, you could see how we were beaten, how we were forced to kneel, how we were humiliated. And I'm sure they will not release those recordings because if they do, all the lies that Bukele is putting out will end.
La gran mentira que intentaron montar ellos.
Roger, thank you so much for talking to us. I know briefly, and I know you've talked to so many people, but thank you. I really appreciate it.
Vale, gracias. Que estén bien.
In a few weeks, Human Rights Watch will release a report about what went on with the Venezuelan immigrants in CECOT. So keep an eye out for that. You've been listening to Rights and Wrongs from Human Rights Watch. This episode was produced by me and Curtis Fox. Sophie Soloway is the associate producer. Ife Fatunase and Stacey Sullivan are the executive producers. Thanks also to Anthony Gale. I'm Ngofeen Mputubwele. I'll be back with a new episode in 2 weeks. Thanks for listening.